Now, this next story covers the horrific ordeal that two best friends, Mike and John, went through in a small village called Petter, Suffolk, United Kingdom. Now, Petter's extremely rural and it pretty much is one straight little country road all the way through, and there's a few houses on the edge of this little country road, and they're pretty much all surrounded by field and farmland. Now, Mike had actually purchased a little two-bedroom cottage that was literally on the edge of this little country road that ran through the village. And he lived there with his 6-month-old daughter Lily and his wife Shanice. Shanice and Lily had actually gone to her parents for the weekend, which really gave Mike an opportunity to spend some time with his best friend of 20 years, John. They hadn't had much time recently just to generally hang out, have a few beers, talk, watch some films and relax together like they used to. John turned up at Mike's at about 8 p.m. They ordered some pizzas in and they started streaming a couple of movies. They were having a great catch up, time passed really quickly, and before they knew it, it was 11 p.m. Now, Mike and John were both smokers, so they decided they'd go out and have a cigarette. They went out the back door, stood on the gravel driveway, continued their conversation, and just generally admired the view. The moon was shining really brightly, so they could see across the surrounding fields. As they're admiring this view, John noticed a light probably around 600 foot away from where they're standing in the field. So he pointed this out to Mike and they both began staring at this light. As they were staring at this light, they realised that this light started to move faster, and it appeared that whoever was holding or whatever was holding this light was beginning to run or sprint because it was starting to get closer and closer and closer. Now, Mike kind of chuckled, not really concerned, but he said, sod that. And he threw down his cigarette and he kind of ushered John in, and they both went in the back door, locked it, and went back to their movie. After a couple of minutes had passed, they had both kind of completely forgotten about this light and they'd gone back to their movie, taken a few sips of beer, and were having a general good conversation again. A minute later, they began to hear footsteps on the gravel outside, the very same gravel they'd been standing and smoking on just a few moments before. Now, Mike and John just kind of glanced at each other, as if this sound had suddenly reminded them of the light that they'd seen in the field, and they almost instantly connected the two. Now, Mike took the remote, paused the TV, and they just sat in silence for a moment and just listened. And a couple of moments passed, and again they heard no more gravel footsteps. So they just assumed that it was perhaps an animal and went back to watching the film again. Around 10 minutes later, they began to hear the crunching of the gravel again. This time they looked at each other with slightly more concern, because the gravel sounded like it was right outside their window, right behind where John was actually sitting. Now, John placed his beer on the floor, kind of took a deep breath and pulled open the curtain. Now, John wasn't at all certain about what he thought he saw, but he thought he saw somebody run past the window as he lifted the curtain open. And he told Mike exactly what he thought he saw. Now, Mike and John, by this point, they were a little bit concerned because, a figure's a bit different from an animal or something. And they knew that putting two and two together, whatever it was able to hold a light. Before they could hold any further conversation about what action they were going to take next, Mike thought he heard a little tap coming from the kitchen. Because they'd been watching a film, the actual lounge door, which was next to the kitchen, was actually shut. So Mike opened up the door, walked out to the kitchen. After opening the door, Mike just froze. And John kind of stuttered and said, "Mike, what's wrong?" Mike just didn't respond, and he was just almost frozen with fear. So John thought it would be a good idea to get up and investigate for himself. With that, a shudder ran down his spine. There on the window ledge of the kitchen was a lamp. And this was blatant proof that someone was walking around their house. Someone was listening, someone was watching. And it confirmed that somebody was right behind where John was sitting, right by that window. John just said to Mike, the lamp, someone's out there, aren't they? Mike said, "I'm not worried about the lamp. he said, "Take a closer look at the window." So as John kind of stepped in front of Mike, he could then make out that there was a screwdriver stabbed in between the frame on the outside of the window to the kitchen. It looked like whoever, whatever it was trying to get in, and that they were disturbed by Mike opening the kitchen door. This thought terrified both men. With that, the back door handle started shaking, and there was thudding on the back door. A thump, 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 and then the rattle of the handle would go. This sound sprung both gents into action. They both ran into the lounge and shut the kitchen door. Mike and John both agreed that enough was enough and that they were going to call the police straight away. With that, they heard tapping again, coming from behind that closed kitchen door. John was first to spring into action, opened up the kitchen door, remembering that whatever it was trying to gain access by the window with the screwdriver. John opened the door and he leapt back and slammed the door shut again. Mike also started, "John, what is it? What did you see?" And John just said, a clown, a clown. It took Mike a moment to process this, and John said, "I saw a clown, a man in a clown mask, and he had a knife." There was then a tap coming from the lounge window. Mike, who was then closest to this window, opened the curtains. Mike let out a startled sound and yanked the curtain by mistake as he jumped out the way, causing the curtain to come off the pole. It was then they both very clearly could see it was a man in a clown mask tapping the tip of his knife on the window. He then glared at each of them eye to eye, stuck his tongue out and licked the window pane. He then ducked and ran away. A few moments later, connection error came up on the TV. As mentioned previously, both gents had been streaming films. Before Mike or John could even process what this meant, they heard a huge smash come from the kitchen. As they peered round the corner, they could see a pane of glass had been broken in the kitchen window. John and Mike just stared at this window, and after a few moments they saw this clown mask appear, and he began putting his big hand that was dressed in a leather glove through the broken pane, grabbing at the handle, trying to open the window. Luckily, the handle was locked, and it was on the latch. Just in the nick of time, John made out the sight of blue lights coming from the front window. It was the police. They were there at last. They peered back at the kitchen window, and the clown was gone. 2 officers attended Mike's home, and what they discovered was horrifying in its own mind. They found a collection of knives, a collection of screwdrivers, a crowbar, and several other pairs of pliers and various other tools, all in a duffel bag. To add to the horror, one of the officers informed Mike that the clown was seconds from gaining access via the back door. He had actually managed to chip away most of the wooden door and actually get down to the mechanism. To add to it, the same officer also informed Mike that had they have not locked the kitchen window, then they would have probably actually managed to have gained access without Mike and John even ever knowing. The phone line had also been cut, which explained why the TV read that there was a network error. John was never invited back to that home by Mike, because Mike himself never spent another single night at that property. He actually moved back with his parents, sold the house and relocated. This whole ordeal deeply disturbed both Mike and John. Neither of them could help but wonder, what if that window hadn't have been locked? What if the back door wasn't locked? Why did he slash the car tyres? Why was he trying to gain access? What were his intentions? Why did he have the knives? Why them? And what could have happened if the police hadn't have turned up when they did? This clown meant harm. So if you see a light approaching you from a distance in the dark, make sure you lock your windows and lock all of the doors. We really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do like and subscribe, and we are really trying to get several pieces of content out a week. If you have any urban legends, myths, scary stories that you would like us to tell and do some research on, please do leave it in the comments below.